Is this?
Agenda.
Hey, how are you?
I want to swing it over when someone's talking.
Well, I was just looking at all the stuff that, you know, all of that stuff is, and that thing about the desk. It was just all about how house.
Oh, thank you.
That's house.
Right.
So. So.
Do you ever met Tony? Tony Skinny Rescue? PJ.
Yes.
PJ.
Oh, PJ. So.
Finally, yeah. My little cat saver. Oh, we took some pictures.
Yeah.
No, I've got the tool.
What part of her little critter shirt under her? Oh, big way.
He's not huge, but he's.
No. Well.
But he's soft.
But he's
Yeah.
here, and then where's another one? He's like, well, no.
Thank you. So I don't know if we have until March. Okay.
You're like this,
This is
Oh, no, I see. Yeah, or every once in a while, he kept it from one.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that
My mom, it's been cold.
Yeah, that's just
Okay. They died. Health transfusion a lot. Now those, but as soon as they come up to like, if they're getting warm and that, it'll look good.
Yes.
I would look up, I could look those up.
Good evening. Welcome to the January 16th, 2020 meeting of San Francisco's Commission on Animal Control and Welfare. Secretary Torres, could you please read the roll call?
Nina Irani,
Present.
Russell Sanofsky, present. Anne-Marie Fortier,
Present.
Lenny Rosenberg,
She'll be just a few minutes late.
John Steele, here. Jane Tobin,
Here.
Brian Van Horn, here. Officer Ryan Crockett,
Not here?
Lisa Wade.
Not here. Okay, general public comment. Members of the public may address the commission with comments on items within the commission's jurisdiction other than items on the agenda at the beginning or end of the meeting, but not both. Is there any public comment? Okay, seeing none. Moving on. Approval of draft minutes from the January 2020 meeting. Did anyone have any comments or corrections for the meeting minutes? Okay. I actually had just a few brief questions, Secretary Torres. Just under item number 4, the reports. Was that Commissioner Fortier that reported that, or was it Commissioner Tobin? I don't recall.
I believe it was, you made
I think
it,
it was me, yeah.
Okay,
Mentioned
okay.
that.
And it wasn't technically a report, but I just kind of,
It was just a comment.
Yeah.
Right, that's right.
Okay, and then under item 8, I think we did not agree to include the GGNRI proposed changes this month, so
Okay.
we could delete that.
sure.
And then I think I remember the adjournment was at 6:50 p.m. because it wasn't a very long meeting. So I think, do you recall?
It was an hour and 41 minutes. So,
Yeah.
so so 6:50, right? Okay, I apologize, I'll make sure I take that.
No problem at all.
And then I'm sorry, the item that we decided not to it was the proposed changes for the.
Right, item 8T. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for doing those very thorough minutes.
I will try to be a little more concise, definitely concise in the future. It's just, there was just so much discussion concerning the animal cruelty law. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes as amended.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, the minutes are approved. Moving on to chairpersons and commissioners' reports. Commissioners' reports regarding recent activities in the community involving animal issues that have been discussed by the commission in the past. Do any commissioners have updates for us? Okay. Is there any, okay, thank you. Moving on to old business. Euthanasia protocol at SF Animal Care and Control. The commission will discuss ACC protocols for when euthanasia is advised and an ordinance codifying the protocols. Commissioner Chinovsky, would you please lead this issue?
Sure. We kind of began discussing this a little bit last week, or last month, sorry, after initially discussing it previous months, just because members of the public have brought their concerns regarding the public and animal rescue organizations being alerted clearly and concisely when animal care and control is to euthanize an animal. So basing this information on some other laws that have been codified in a couple other cities, as I showed you, I reworked this a little bit for this month so that it's a little bit tighter and kind of actually works for what we want to do a little bit better. And essentially this just is a way to codify that animal care and control is alerting every possible rescue partner and interested party by phone, by mail, or not by mail, but all public reasonable attempts made to verify these organizations and these people or interested persons are adhered to within 48 hours of an animal being euthanized. There are a couple caveats, obviously, at the bottom in terms of animals that should be adopted out or rescued out or are in serious health issues. But that's kind of the basis of it, and the obvious kind of, as I said, the instance for this is that we alert the public as much as possible. Kind of the access to social media, I think, is important to this because it spreads the net out as much as possible. And codifying this, I think, is important just because, as we discussed in the past, maybe the current administration and current people at Animal Care and Control are behind this issue and go forth with it and practice this way. That's no way meaning that future organizations and future administrations of Animal Care and Control are going to adhere to this policy or even think this is a wise and advisable policy. So by codifying this, which is kind of just very simple, basic alerting the public and alerting rescue partners of every possible animal that's about to be euthanized within 48 hours. As I said, we're just casting a wider net to do what we're all here to do and try to save and help every animal that's possible. We can obviously discuss it and see what we need to do and go forward from here and change it. But I think it's kind of very basic. One of the little things that I kind of amended from what was before is that it talked about 2 business days. And one of the things we talked about in the past is that I've seen from other states, basically it's New York, really a lot that seems to be doing it at a couple other places where on Twitter and other social media sites, local activists, and not even people who are local activists, kind of local celebrities or national celebrities will tweet out or put on Facebook animals that are scheduled to be euthanized within there, it's 2 business days. The problem with that obviously is their weekends, and animals don't go by business days, they go by days. So animals are euthanized over the weekend, I'm sure. So it's the 48 hours, I think, is important as opposed to 2 business days. That's kind of one of the little changes, little tweaks, I think. But that's kind of the crux of it, so to speak. That's kind of where we are. Another question was concerned.
Okay, so just before we get into Commissioner's questions, I wanted to give Deputy Director Steele a chance to give input on this because I think where we last left it, Animal Care Control hadn't had a chance to really give input about any concerns, comments, whether it's administratively feasible, all of that. So we were going to hear from Deputy Director Steele. And then also PJ McCoskey, the proponent of this ordinance who first brought this to the Commission, is here as well to answer any questions. So.
Thank you. I don't have a specific report up, and as you all know, that I've just been with ACC for a short time. Obviously, euthanasia is something that we look at on a regular basis. Taking a look at specific animals, whether it's cats or dogs. If you look at our numbers that we publish, those numbers have been coming down by a percentage each year for the last couple of years. And I think that's a goal we're always striving toward. We have partners that we reach out to try and avoid all cost euthanasia to save lives. I can give you more specific numbers for our next meeting so you can see the effect that current policies and procedures are having and what measures we're taking. I didn't bring that data with me to share with the Commission.
Okay, and so I guess then I will open it up for Commissioners' questions. I know I have some questions. Unless PJ, you wanted to add something right now, or?
Could I just say a few things?
Sure.
The issue isn't, is SFACZ doing better than lots of other shelters in terms of killing healthy and treatable animals. The issue is that animals are still being killed who are adoptable, who are medically treatable, who are behaviorally rehabilitatable, who are potentially savable because they're neonates. Until a time that isn't happening, we need to be looking for ways of doing more. And this legislation is an easy way for that to happen. The reason I feel so strongly about this isn't just because I found Floppy, and Floppy was not given a chance and was less than a year old and completely physically healthy and killed, but because I started a nonprofit like 12 years ago in New York City that pulled animals from New York City Animal Care and Control, and I saw the way transparency not only saved more lives, but uplifted rescues and rescue communities. So it bothers me that we even have to discuss what this. It should already be done without a law because it's not being done and hasn't been being done. This should be codified into so that, like Russell said, that shifting priorities, changing leadership, it's not up for debate. It just is something that's part of the process. When I was running a no-kill rescue in Brooklyn, someone saw a cat named Mr. Muffin on Facebook with a terrible picture. He looked evil, who lived in Sacramento, and this cat was scheduled to be killed. And she was like, I really want this cat. I think I would like to give this cat. I was like, he might be feral. So we fill out our adoption application, filled it out, checked our references, she was approved. We pulled the cat. I was like, you have to come here or, because I won't fly this cat cargo. And I had a friend who lived over here at the time go do a home visit. Everything was checked out. She flew me with the cat, so the cat could be in the cargo, not in the cargo, in the lawn, and adopted the cat. This woman's in Sacramento. This was a New York City cat. Transparency saved that cat's life. Having a Facebook page saved that cat's life. When I noticed something that didn't happen in New York City anymore, that happens a lot in San Francisco, talking about suffering and sickness, and we have to euthanize. ACC has repeatedly made it clear that they are underfunded, overworked, and don't have the resources to medically treat animals. So they're not necessarily in the best position to be making a decision on whether an animal is treatable or not, quite frankly. Another situation, New York City, there was a puppy who got sick, a pit bull mixed puppy who got sick in New York City Animal Care and Control when I was running my rescue. He had canine influenza, parvo, pneumonia from that, and was in terrible shape. I didn't have, the organization didn't have the money to take him, but someone called and said, I saw this dog online, is there anything you can do? And I was like, well, if you have a credit card, and you want to pay for very expensive potentially veterinary bills, we will try. He's very sick. She said, okay, and the bill was $9,000. It didn't come out of our budget, it came out of her credit card. He lived, and he was adopted by her neighbor. Coffee was his name. Cats who were slammed with cars with terrible diaphragmatic hernias, which is like a really serious injury where they're, I mean, you can talk more about this, but their organs down here up in their chest, you know, that animal's suffering. Well, yeah, he's just got hit by a car. He's suffering in that moment. It doesn't mean he's going to suffer forever. We pulled him, got him emergency care. He survived, totally normal, got adopted out. I could go on. I don't know how useful that is, but I want to, it's important that we be very centered in the fact that each one of these animals, we can talk about numbers all we want. The numbers are good, right? But each one of these beings is an individual being who desires to live and who matters in and of themselves. And we should be exhausting every opportunity to help those beings. This is a step towards that. It's very common sense. I actually, Russell and I didn't have a chance to talk about this. I actually think some of the changes are asking too much of SFACC. I don't think it should be every social media, personally. Because I think that's going to be a reason not to do it. I think that's going to be an argument not to do it. I think that asking them to do it on a social media is totally reasonable, like Facebook. And yeah, I mean, I just, animals are still being killed. They're not being killed because they're end-stage kidney failure and there's no other options. They're not being killed because they're so aggressive they're going to kill a child. They're being killed because no one knows that they exist. And the people who are their best advocates, they're hidden. They're dying invisible deaths. And that needs to stop.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioners, question?
I have a question, and maybe Russell, you can start with this. Could we just talk about the process and procedure for this? So if for our benefit, but also for the public, if we approve this proposal, it then goes to the Board of Supervisors, correct?
As far as I know, it goes to the Board of Supervisors, or we try to get the
Right.
Board of Supervisors to
Take it up.
take it up and then codify it.
And codify, and so we, the commission, can send a letter on behalf of the commission. Members of the public can also go to, if it shows up on the agenda. Okay.
Well, it would take lobbying effort on our part to get one of the Board of Supervisors to pick it up and sponsor it.
Well, on the part of the commission, but
That's
also
what
on
we
the
have.
part of the public,
Mhm.
right? So I just want to be clear that this is a partnership
Mhm.
in order to move things forward, okay? And then, so I wanted to clarify that process. And then secondly, I have a question for Mr. McCoskey. So if I read, if I understand, recall the story of Bobby correctly, section 3 of this proposal that it says, notify or make a reasonable attempt to notify by variable documented communication. Is it your position that that ACC did not make a reasonable attempt to contact you or rescue organizations, and this language would correct that going forward?
Well, they did make.
I understand, and are you comfortable that this language would correct that wrong?
Can you ask
The reason I ask
yeah,
is,
thank you.
well, I ask because reasonable attempt is going to be very subjective. And I'm just wondering if you're comfortable that this language says a reasonable attempt, and do you feel that had a reasonable attempt to notify by a veritable documentation that floppy might have been saved? In other words, do you believe this language is sufficient? Because it's subjective.
It is subjective. Contrary to belief that I'm trying to take down SFACC, I think reasonable I don't want to create a complete overburden that's unrealistic. One, because I want this legislation to go through and pass. So I think reasonable attempt could be a certified letter, it could be an email, it could be a Facebook page. So I'm comfortable with it, and Austin's comfortable with it, and they're kind of leading the fight for reducing the killing of healthy and treatable animals.
Okay. And then a follow-up question to that for you, and also maybe for the commissioners, is section 5, where it says notify all adoption partners, rescue organizations, potential adopters. The director of ACC, Virginia Donahue, stated that it would be a burden for them to contact all of these organizations individually, and that is not their process. Is it your belief that, again, I'm trying to get to the subjective nature of some of these sentences, some of these clauses, right? And to me, notify all adoptive partners, it seems to me that would be an opportunity for someone to claim that a potential adoptive partner was not notified. So I'm a little worried about that all, and maybe I'm just being a little bit too picky about that. But do you agree that a reasonable attempt to contact these organizations, rescue organizations, in addition to a social media posting, would satisfy what we're trying to attain here and potentially save lives like Floppy?
And more importantly, lives of animals who aren't as controversial as Floppy.
Sure.
Because there's a ton of those.
Yeah.
I do. I think one without the other will not work.
Okay.
It's not good. Just
So
like,
meaning social media without direct contact to rescue organizations, okay?
right. And it doesn't have to be like someone, right now, their way of doing it is actually pretty inefficient. Which is that they individually decide
Right.
to contact who, and it's not necessarily based on the most scientific method. It's based on
Director Donahue admitted as such, but her reasoning, as I recall, was that it would be too burdensome to, number one, to contact all organizations, and that constant notification is not welcome by all the rescue organizations. In other words, what I understood her to say was that the rescue organizations appreciate some editing of that call list.
The thing is that and I ran a rescue organization, and
Yeah.
Maria can even speak to this. What rescue organizations often like in the editing is transparency about what is happening. And so what's happening right now is ACC wants to get a cat out because they just want to get a cat out because that cat isn't particularly doing well there. But they're not necessarily considering killing that cat yet. They just want to move that cat. And plenty of rescue organizations, mine and Maria, I've talked to her at length about this since I've met her through this process, is that they would like to be able to be told, this cat is just we want to move because we don't think she's doing the greatest. And this cat, we're actually going to kill tomorrow. And that way we as rescuers and they as rescue people who run organizations can triage which animals need the most help in the most immediate time. So I think the Facebook page alone is an opt-in, right? You can either look at it or not look at it, right? The rescue thing it's sort of the same if it's an email. And Commision automatically can create this. So it's not as if, so the idea that it's a burden, it's just false.
Well,
It's not necessarily.
Thank you, Buddy. Buddy, if you could speak on behalf of It works for a rescue organization because.
So it's not necessarily, and Anne-Marie I don't think is arguing here, she's trying to support actually thinking thoughtfully about some of this language. Without ACC being here, I can say that what I gathered from her point of view is not so much that it's a burden on them, but it's a burden on the rescues. And I can say that it 100% is a burden on a rescue like Muttville we get hundreds of emails every week, and we're inundated with
The
emails every
legislation
this.
provides though an opt-in, opt-out. So if Mudville didn't want to receive those.
But we
emails-
do want to get dogs from ACC, we just want to get dogs that are appropriate for our environment. And the way that it's set up now is they send us the dogs that they have decided, and we've worked together to come up with the criteria of the animals that are appropriate for our environment, and those are the dogs they offer us.
Well, and as I read this, to that point, as I read number 5, I read this: notify all adoption partners of an animal, but there's no, in this sentence, I see no room for that edit or that continuation of the relationship or the partnership or the respecting the needs and desires of our critical rescue partners.
What's interesting though.
Just 1 second, can I just, maybe I can answer this
Yeah.
question. The original proposal did not include number 5. That was like a catch-all that I think Russell included. That can be cleared up, but under part 2, number 1, this is what ACC is already doing. It's saying notify or make a reasonable attempt to notify any rescue that has previously requested to be notified.
Yes.
So that
Correct,
is
that's what they're already doing.
Yeah.
And then I agree with you that, notifying everyone again via all social media, that's overbroad, but we can clear that up and say, something like post to the public on social media and delete the language because that language is repetitive because 1, 2, and 3 are already saying what number 5 is saying.
Okay, so I don't know, I'm sorry about this, I don't have the new changes, I only have what I presented. Here's a copy. Let me, so we're talking about 5 right now?
And may I just say something? With all due respect, Mr. Markowski, I'm not asking for your permission, I'm asking about your opinion. I mean, if
I don't have any,
that-
I don't think that I have any actual standing here, but
Right,
I do,
and so when I brought it up, I wanted to say, in your opinion, is this language too broad? To me, it seems too broad, and I want to hear more about
Right,
that.
I wanted to look at it though.
Yes,
so I know what
yes,
you're saying.
please.
Can I just comment one thing?
Yeah, please.
I understand what you're saying, but, so 3 other organizations have said that they do want this. Like, they do want to receive animals who are being killed. I don't think, policy should be based on, maybe the favorite and maybe the most effective rescue partner, the feelings of that. The other thing is,
I'm sorry, I object to
I
a
don't
favorite
know
organization.
either.
I think that's crossing the line a little bit. That seems like it's getting a little bit personal. I don't know anything about it, but I don't know that,
I think Muttville is a great organization.
yeah, I don't know that it's considered the favorite by ACC, but anyway,
Okay.
continue with that.
That wasn't snide, but my point is that policy shouldn't be we shouldn't then just not be considered to these animals that are at risk or at risk. The other thing.
Right, but I understand 3 organizations that want this, but I can list 3 other organizations, Muttville included, that don't want it, so you can't.
So you can speak that Muttville does not want to be, you're saying that Muttville does not want to be told 48 hours in advance of animals who are being killed? You're
Correct,
saying-
because not
Via
every animal
social
is an
media,
animal
we're
that
not
we
reading
can
the whole
take in.
sentence.
Yeah, so,
If I may
No, via
interrupt,
personal, notification.
I don't
Right.
see anything about personal here,
Well-
it just basically says that
Oh.
there's gonna be a website
And the
notification.
public, so here's what's problematic,
Okay, I'm
notify
sorry.
them and the public. So there is a mandate to
But,
notify.
via
Okay, so you're
social
just
media.
saying that post these dogs on Facebook.
In other words, all
Well,
of the
it's
prior
via
ones,
social media.
everybody is being contacted via social
Got it.
media, not necessarily by a phone call to Muttville saying, hey, we're gonna kill a 2-year-old
They're
dog.
still gonna call you about the animal, the 6-year-old Yorkie who has patella luxation.
Yes,
Um,
okay, then that's the part that wasn't clear in this language.
But the other thing that I just wanted to comment on is, Amber, I think up until like recently, you were doing the minutes, or who was doing the minutes?
I was doing that.
Okay, so repeatedly it said animals are rarely being euthanized, right?
Oh, that was the agenda?
That's the agenda.
Okay,
Yeah.
so who does the agenda?
I was doing the
Okay,
agenda.
So repeatedly you were saying that animals are rarely euthanized.
Yes.
So if it's a rarity, right,
Yeah.
then is it really gonna overburden the rescue groups if it's such a rarity? that
They're not just offering us dogs that are gonna be euthanized, they're offering us dogs.
I'm so confused of
This is a euthanasia.
So that,
This doesn't conflict with what is already going on. This is just an added thing and a broader publicity so that animals who are at risk get seen by more people and more rescue organizations. And also, what happened in New York is when other people saw that there was still more work to be done, new rescuers stepped up.
so Mr. McCloskey, to your point, you're right. The rare, that's subjective, right? The use of euthanasia is rare, that's completely subjective, right? And you take offense by that.
Well, it happens every day, so it's not rare.
That's fine, it's considered rare, and the point
Every day
is,
is not rare.
I'm not gonna argue that point, but I'm trying to give you some credit here by saying, you're right. Thank you for pointing out the fact that as we consider legislation, let's be very careful about language that is not precise. And rare is subjective, so we should not use that, right? And when we say, there's other subjective language in this.
There's no rare use in this protocol. So
Exactly.
can we just kind of get back? I understand your point, BJ.
My point was just about,
It's okay.
it's not gonna be overwhelming.
Maybe focus on the actual legislation that is a 48-hour emergency alert registration. It's not telling you every animal that they have up for adoption. It's alerting you within 48 hours the animals they're going to euthanize. If Mudville gets this information, Mudville can pass this information onto their gigantic network of followers and people by just forwarding it out there. That's all this information is. It's a way to get way more of a wideband, broad public, and a broadband message out there that these animals are going to be euthanized.
So the
And that's what it's for.
The opposite.
I mean, I just have serious concerns about this moving forward at all. I mean, especially you mentioned in the beginning how underfunded ACC is. You're asking them, this is a big ask. Because, and the reason is, I understand even if it's one animal a day or one animal a week, all of the people that are gonna be reaching out to them on Facebook to try and figure out and network this animal, this is a whole new job.
Can we hear from ACC about, excuse me, administratively, is this feasible, not feasible, what are the thoughts there?
So I'm here to represent ACC. I'm not here to make the decisions or why things were changed. The way things are set up right now is we have a good list of partners that we can reach out to. We know that they specialize in certain animals, certain conditions, and we know that we're going to get a response from those partners. As we go down the list, there's less chance that we're going to find a good match. And that's why part of what we used to do, where we used to just send out emails to everybody about everything, we get better results now by being focused than we do trying to blast everybody. And so I think what the argument was that if we start kind of going back to blasting people again, we're going to get less of a response than we are now. And so it's actually less of a life-saving than what we're currently doing. is the argument.
Just to clarify, this doesn't say that any of that is getting changed the way that I read it. I'm still confused that
Correct,
the
that was-
only change would be the social media. It's not that different people are gonna get calls about German Shepherd rescue won't get calls with poodles. None of that would change, as I'm understanding this is written. The only thing that would change is whether or not there's a social media site that would blast that out to the rest of the world. And I'm curious as to whether or not Animal ACC here has reached out to Austin or any of the other municipalities or considered it since the last discussion.
Right, that is my question. I mean, you speak specifically about New York City's animal shelter that's doing this. What's the success rate that they've seen? Have they seen an increase in adoptions now for these animals that have 48-hour euthanasia?
Well, yes, because at first it was activists doing it, and they decided to take it on themselves, because it was effective. And it's also not just effective as far as like saving those individual animals. It enables those rescue organizations to save more animals. Like rescue organizations that I do fundraising for, that I've done fostering for, there's an animal that's going to be killed who has a really severe upper respiratory infection, and the rescue organization knows that that animal's gonna have to be immediately hospitalized. The rescue organization on Facebook says, we can pull if we raise X number of dollars, and people who aren't gonna do anything but say, well, we'll donate that X number of dollars, donate that. I mean, for 10 years, I watched this, not just with my nonprofit, but with lots of other nonprofits and nonprofits that still do it, like, are saving lives that are otherwise, if without this, they're invisible. No one there's certain animals that get one call to SFSPCA when everyone in this room knows that particular animal isn't going to be pulled by SFSPCA because of who they are, what their situation is at any given moment, like what season it is, and that's it. And that's not how it should work.
Yeah, I understand. I think the question was more statistically, do you have any statistics about the success rates, which it sounds like, I'm hearing a lot of anecdotes, which are great, but it sounds like.
Has ACC contacted any of these places to see what their success rate is?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but we're asking if you have had any, do you have any statistics on the success rates of these Facebook pages? I'm sorry, Mr. McCullough, I was asking you, did you?
Do I have, all I can
That was
tell
the
you-
question, the question was, do you have any statistics on this?
I don't have hard statistics.
Okay, thank you.
But they do have a reduced reduction
Thank
in
you.
euthanasia.
Okay.
I mean, Austin definitely does.
Well, and so does New York. Yeah.
It's also not just about that one particular animal. As PJ was kind of saying, this is an effort to broadcast the concept and what is going on, and that these animals are out there, these animals are being killed, these animals need saving. As PJ was saying, it's a fundraising tool, it's an information tool, it's a way to educate the public about what's going on.
I also think it's a right of citizens who care about animals. We should be able to have access to knowing what happens to the animals that are like that are part of like our city, that are our neighbors in non-human form. Like, we should have a right to know what's happening to them.
It is a transparency issue as well, yes.
And again, I know I've asked this 2 or 3 times, but since you wrote it, my interpretation under 5 is that notify everybody up until the public via all social media sites. So I just want to clarify here that this, again, doesn't mean that Mukville is going to be having any change in their status quo.
Yes, I understand that now, yeah.
But that it would just say, we want this out on social media so that it can be seen by interested parties, understanding that now you may funnel a lot of interest into an already overwhelmed front office staff at ACC, and maybe looking into how Austin dealt with that, New York dealt with that, seeing if it actually is something that's doable from within ACC's evaluation would be really valuable information here.
Is that something that ACC can answer for us? Not necessarily right now, because I know that, I don't want to put you on the spot, but the question is basically, whether ACC can administer this, and I think the major change is the social media site. Because as Commissioner Van Horn was saying, ACC's resources are already strapped, so can ACC, do this program?
And I think I'd have to answer a question with a question. It depends on if that system is better than the system we're currently operating. If it's going to take more manpower to do it that way versus the way we're currently doing it, is it going to result in better results doing it that way versus what we're currently doing? I do agree that greater transparency is going to help everybody, and I think we're working toward that as well. So we do agree on that. It's just as far as the way in which we go about advertising those animals that need additional help, if it's not being met through the partners we're already reaching out to.
ACC already has a Facebook page that they post on regularly, and when we get to some information later, I will comment on something they posted just today. And I think Twitter is, the reason I put all, I know that there are literally hundreds of social media sites. I just put all, as this can obviously be edited. so that it's more than just one. I think Twitter is very important as well, and that's where I see a lot of these things from. I see it from two different people from New York who post these issues
And
about animals from New
and I
York.
personally am very comfortable, and I think it's preferred to just push one social media, because I just think that that is completely reasonable, and I think there's no argument that that's an overburden.
And sorry to interrupt you, Mr. McCoskey. We appreciate you being here to speak and answer questions, and it's all very informative. I would just ask that if you can just limit your response right now to the commissioner's questions.
Okay, so should I sit down?
Directed towards you.
Should I sit down?
No, you can please stay up here, I think, unless the commissioners don't have any other questions, or,
I have one. We talked about this, and I think you two were talking about this before the meeting. What do you consider the limitations of what interested parties might do for an animal? Is this a donation only? Is this, if there are behavior issues and there's liability attached to that, how does that?
Mostly with dangerous dog issues, they can't be adopted to the public in New York, but they are rescue placement only.
Right.
But what will happen is that someone who might want to sponsor that dog, and if there is a rescue organization, they can approach that rescue organization, and there's communication where someone may do something that they wouldn't otherwise do because they have financial support, an organization. But nothing in this legislation prevents or stops ACC from making reasonable limitations on what is acceptable, what needs to be done. In New York, what happens with a dog that is deemed aggressive is some of them, not all of them, because there's a difference between a truly aggressive dog and a dog that's deemed aggressive or is acting aggressive in the shelter. There's a liability waiver. The rescue is on a liability waiver with New York City ACC. They might need to provide a veterinarian who's going to oversee care, or a behaviorist that's going to oversee care. But this legislation doesn't. ACC can do what it wishes with that. This is just really about notification of the person who brings the animal in, notification of rescue organizations, and sort of a wider community effort to allow more life saving.
Russell, I have a question for you. So back to this number 5, it's still unclear to me if, so I think the language here is problematic. Is the idea that via social media, all potential partners would be notified? Because the way I read it, it might mean send a letter, make a phone call, and post on social media. Or can we put it some way that, within reasonable intent, post it to social media, through social media, notify partners or something?
Absolutely, we can change it to some, that is
Because I think that's
the gist of what I'm.
That's what we're aiming for, right? Okay. Because all adoption partners and all social media, I just feel like there's too many opportunities for
I appreciate that.
loopholes.
Like I said, it's certainly a draft. That's why
Right.
we're here.
Right.
Could even just say notified via social media.
If it were simply
Yep.
notified via all potential interested parties, organizations, individuals, something that broad might cover what we're trying to say.
And it's nitpicky, but maybe 48 hours prior, otherwise technically you could interpret it as we euthanized this dog 36 hours ago, because it's within.
That's true. Prior. True.
I have a follow-on question to Commissioner Tobin's question, and I wanted to ask Commissioner Tanowski. My question is about number 4. I'm not sure if this was included in the original language, but it's saying, surrender the animal to one of the partner rescue organizations or interested parties notified to avoid the animal's death if a rescue organization or interested person requests it. And my concern is that this does not leave much discretion for animal care control to use their judgment. And so I wanted to know what were your thoughts on that language and whether there is enough discretion there so that, behavioral issues or public safety issues
I
can
believe,
be addressed.
if I remember correctly, that is part of the original, that I don't, I'm sorry, I don't have that copy either. I believe that was part of part of the original language. And that is just saying that instead of doing one of these, notifying the public or notifying these animals prior to 48 hours of the euthanasia, that they surrender the animal to one of those partner organizations. I believe that's what that's about.
Okay, because it doesn't seem to allow much discretion here before surrender. I know that there's an exception under Part 3 for animals with documented histories of unprovoked biting. I'm not sure if that exception is broad enough to capture everything that could be a public safety concern.
Well, I believe that they would just follow their normal adoption rules and with their partner organizations.
Okay.
May
But it's
not be
also
clear
saying-
there, but that's the concept, that they would just surrender the animal to one of their partner organizations.
Right, well, I think the language needs to say something that they can still follow, some sort of protocol before doing that. And if it is only for partner rescue organizations, that's one, I guess, rescue organizations are more equipped. But if it is to surrender, it also says to interested parties, then that's another question of what needs to be done before doing that.
Well, one of the reasons we're bringing this up, and just getting back to something that Brian brought up, this isn't just, one of the reasons that we're talking about this isn't just to alert everyone in general, it's to alert interested parties, and that's where this issue originally came up, was that the interested party was not alerted about an animal's euthanasia. So I think it's important to include interested persons in this concept, because they aren't necessarily rescue organizations, yet they can be vetted by the animal rescue organization to be a reasonable adoptee or adopter.
Can we include language that it just said, includes vetting or some kind of protocol before, right now it just says surrender.
And also, number 6 sort of covers the notification of interested parties. If you have an aggressive pit bull that can only go out to a rescue organization that has a history of dealing with that, will put up the liability, responsibility, and take all of that off of ACC's hands, then in theory, that notification required under number 6 is getting the person aware they should have reached out to a rescue.
That's perfectly fine, and we can take out the interested person in number 4 and just surrender the animal to a partner rescue organization.
And that, again, nothing changes over the current
No, I
policy of making sure a dangerous animal doesn't leave the shelter to anybody under any circumstances. It just says all animals.
This isn't changing ACC's adoption partner policy at all or any of that. This is just making sure that everyone possible is alerted that animals prior to 48 hours of the euthanasia. That's all we're trying to drive at here.
Remind me, from my memory, and I could be wrong here because it was several months ago, but with Floppy specifically, I know that they reached out to 2 rescues that they had chosen and thought were appropriate. And was it correct, PJ, that they had entered your phone number wrong, or what was the?
No, they had my phone number.
Got it.
Because the CIP was gone.
Got it, so they had not flagged you as an interested
Well, it
party.
was in the record, but.
But they had not flagged you as a C, what would have been a CIP, an interested party,
Right.
I understand.
Can you speak into the mic again?
Oh.
You lost the mic, thank you.
There were several communications, and the answer was, they knew that I was interested, but because the fixation was on the CIP, it got rid of. There's another issue, but I think that needs to come back. I wasn't contacted, but then also Rocket Dog wasn't contacted, and without getting into was Barry gonna take the dog or not? She was, but whatever. If this would have existed, I would have seen it on Facebook, let's say, and I could have been like, oh, Haley, did they they not contact you? Like, can you give them a call and like push on this? Like, there was lots of, it just creates an ability to like do more networking and on behalf of animals before they're killed.
May I ask a question? Can we move on to part 3? Russell, I have a question for you. Number 1, an animal who is irremediably suffering, who decide, I mean, if you have diabetes, you're suffering for the rest of your life. It's this, and I'm questioning the language here because I feel that unless it's very tight, that it would be foolish to bring in front of the Board of Supervisors.
That's directly taken from the other language.
So could we say something like an animal who is irremediably suffering as determined by a veterinarian or like something?
That's from part 1, right?
From the vets from part 1, right. Well, right, the definition of a veterinarian has been, licensed veterinarian has been defined
You can just add, if you want to add as determined
by
Well,
a licensed veterinarian.
Sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
to Commissioner Van Horn's point, part 1 says irremediable suffering is an animal who has poor or grave prognosis, on, as certified in writing by a licensed vet. So that's already included in the definition.
Thank you, okay.
Did you have other questions? Concerns? Henry?
No,
Okay.
yeah, it's
No, that's
clarify.
cool. No, that's okay.
I think if
I
we add
understand,
that,
like I said, edits obviously bring more.
it just,
We can, like I said, some of this is taken almost directly from the other one, most of it's
Right.
taken directly from the other one, and then I try to add the little parts that are more specific to our concerns.
I know, I've seen how the legal aids to the supervisors work around.
And no, I can understand, and every other thing I've codified has been absolutely
Yeah.
changed by, and you have to work with,
Yeah.
work with the Board of Supervisors as
Right.
well to go back and forth. This is just obviously a draft and a work in progress.
I have a question, going back to part 2 for Russell. Number 6 says notify all interested persons. Number 1 already says notify the interested rescues. Number 2 says notify the owner guardian. Number 3 says notify the finder. Do we need number 6, or are there other interested persons that we are thinking about?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, who are we talking about?
Any interested person, that's the whole, I don't know who those potential people might be. It's a whole host of people. A rescuer, an interested person, people who might want to donate funds, for
And these
instance.
are people who've made themselves known to
In
ACC?
that sense, yes.
Okay,
Well, really, the interested person would be the call interested party, and that was
Right.
just, and it may be in there more than once, but it was just something, like I said, that was the part that we felt, or I felt that it wasn't in the other one that we needed to add, because that was why this issue was brought before us. So it might be redundant. Laws and codified language is often redundant. So I didn't feel bad necessarily about being redundant in places sometimes. And like I said, we can change what we think we want to change.
Are there any more questions?
Did you want to change that?
did you want to change number 6?
Did you wanna add phone call to number 3? Cause like, the interested person is the person who surrendered the animal, correct?
Well,
I just don't know who the interested person is, if that's not who it is, if it's not the
Right.
finder.
We can add that information into just combine number 6 and number 3 in there.
well, I think what you were saying is the interested people can be not just the owner who surrendered, not just the person who found it, not just the rescue, but maybe somebody who finds out about this animal and calls the ACC, so this is kind of a catch-all.
But those
How are
people aren't
they
gonna
gonna-
they're not gonna telephone those people, that's the point of that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So then we take out telephone, or what? What is the,
Well, this gets back to, and
I think we can envelop that into number 3.
and what is verifiable documented communication? This sounds like it might be burdensome, unless you just have records of phone calls or email, I mean, an email is verifiable, I mean,
Yes.
but we don't wanna make
Records of
this,
phone calls.
okay,
Like, that is from the other.
okay, yep,
Well, phone calls are documented.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
right,
Important to
so-
see is we can even add phone call or email.
right.
Does that answer your question? It does, okay.
So I'm confused now, does that mean we get rid of number 6 and incorporate 6
Roll
into?
6 into 3, I think
Roll
is
6 into
the
3,
idea.
okay.
And I think the biggest, for me, sort of information that we would need to make any type of decision here is some feedback from ACC on, you know, after looking at some other communities that have done this, whether or not they think it could fit into their current policy, and if so, what would it take? If not, why?
Yeah. I think these are the questions that we have to have at the ready when meeting with the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, I have just one comment to, TJ, you actually have a lot more, experience than some interested people that might have found an animal on the road that, was surrendered to ACC. And are you going to be, or would you find yourself satisfied if a person was contacted, but if ACC felt that person wasn't capable of dealing with it, but they were contacted, like, found somewhere the person can't afford to do any kind of medical things, like, I wanna know what
So
you
that,
think.
6 wasn't my language in the original language. I personally, even though I wish we lived in a world where that was possible, I personally think that's overburdensome to have ACC calling every single person that just may, and on the fly, especially by phone.
Right.
I think that's the point of the social media, is that it's up there, you know what's happening with the animal. But, I mean, I accepted the fact that Floppy they might have said, well, we deem Floppy dangerous, so he's not available for public adoption, which is the only way you could get him. So he's only available through a rescue pool, and that rescue has to do A, B, and C. That's a reasonable response. That takes into consideration public safety, and it takes into consideration animal welfare, and that's all I wanted.
Okay, that seems fair.
Are there any other questions from commissioners?
And so just to follow up on that, are we confident that the current language allows for ACC to, because, I mean, Floppy was on the street, someone brought him to the street, so apparently there was some interested party at some time that brought him to that unfortunate situation, and if that person, as an interested party, went to ACC saying, oh no, it's my dog and I live on the street, you know, there has to be some sort of, we have to trust that ACC is gonna make the determination that that person is not, and do we feel confident that language is in this proposal?
I don't think it needs to be. They already have standing policies on who's allowed to take which animals under those situations.
Is that, do you agree
The
with
way I'm
that?
reading this is
Yeah.
just about public.
Yes,
safety.
ACC.
Yeah, if the animals are owned, absolutely. There's
Well, it's an animal, if it's a deemed dangerous animal and someone shows up who doesn't have proper housing and the means to deal with it, then already we have measures in place that allows ACC to say the discretion to, and this does not supersede that,
I don't believe so, no.
right?
Okay, if there are no other commissioners' questions, we'll take public comment on this.
Thanks, PJ.
So if you have a comment, please come up.
I'm gonna limit it, oh, hey Sam, 2 minutes, if that's okay, and 1, 2, 3, go.
Hi, my name's Rocket, I'm just an animal advocate. Only related to this discussion, you were talking about number 4 and that there's no mention of any protocols, that just says surrender the animal. And I heard you mention it, but I didn't hear it defined. That it seems to me that just adding the phrase adhering to existing protocols or something like that would work. And I just want to make sure that that doesn't get left off so that it can have a better chance of getting passed.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment? Please line up on the side of the room to facilitate if you do have a comment. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maria Conlon from Gimme Shelter Cat Rescue. You all know me, I believe. Anyways, I learned about, as I mentioned before, became involved in animal care and control in San Francisco because of the social media that I was following in New York. Since then, I have helped 500 cats make it out of ACC. So I think that can't hurt, just putting that stuff up there to help those animals. And as a rescue partner with Animal Care and Control, I absolutely do want to know when cats are going to be destroyed. It may not be the particular kind of cat that we typically take, but we might make a decision to help different kinds of cats. Often we take behavior cats, but we have taken senior cats. A diabetic cat is not a cat that should actually be destroyed. I have a foster currently. I know, I just want to clarify that for the public. And then, the medical is subjective as well. Like, I've had 2 cats that ACC was going to do the courtesy of doing a dental for, and the veterinarian at that time at the shelter deemed that they were suffering and killed the cats. So should we have been able to take those cats and get additional, another vet look at them? We should have had that opportunity, and I did not have that opportunity. So I think it's like, my question would be, why wouldn't you want to have all these animals have an opportunity to have, have their life saved, or have somebody else help them, have people step up. Wouldn't it be great if I had a cat? I have 2 cats that ACC wants me to take right now. Wouldn't it be great if I had 20 fosters sitting out there and I could pick from the best ones because the social media was, helping us get that message out there? Aren't their lives worth it? So, and then the other thing I would like to really just say, because I think this kind of dropped off initially, was that the CIP was also really important. It does sound like it's in the legislation to contact the original finder, contact a finder that's interested in it, but that's super important to reinstate that before we wait for this legislation. I was going to talk about it anyways. Time's up. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Larson. I've been a resident of San Francisco for almost 18 years. And I want to apologize in advance if my comment is scattered. I had a comment prepared, but I realize that I'm a little bit behind in the conversation. I mostly just want to express my support for this proposed legislation. I do believe that transparency is incredibly important. And I am one of those rare, maybe not so rare, but interested persons who may at certain times find myself with the capacity and extra funds to take an animal that I may see on social media that needs time to rehabilitate and heal and all those things outside of a shelter environment. I do want to say that I'm a big fan of SMACC. I think they take on the hard work of taking all animals, and that often leaves them in a position where they may have to euthanize an animal. I follow ACC on social media, I read their newsletters, and I've encountered countless volunteers on the street walking dogs, and the love and care that I've witnessed has been incredibly inspiring, so I want to thank you for doing that work. I came into the room, it seemed very hostile, but I realized you're working out the language is very important, but I'm happy to see at the end of the meeting it seems like this is going to be taken in front of the Board of Supervisors, and so I thank you for doing the work, and I really hope we can see this put into action in San Francisco, because I think there are a lot of really great rescue organizations and a lot of really great volunteers and a lot of people who may not, like myself, who may not be actively working with rescue groups, but would be willing to take on animals when they could. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Karen Bernstein. First of all, I'd like to thank you for partnering with the public for so long to improve the lives of animals in San Francisco. We have a specific request that's been discussed at length about the legislation and the accompanying CIP. And there's one point that I'd like to bring up. Obviously, it saves the lives of animals, and that's a positive thing from our perspective. It prevents suffering and unnecessary deaths. Something else that I'd like to talk about is by not having that in place, it impedes fundraising for ACC. They do fundraising on their website. San Francisco Friends of ACC does fundraising. There are also individual fundraising events. The reason that it would impede this, it also affects the public perception of ACC and the public perception of San Francisco city government. We live in a very tech-savvy environment, and when We know that Chameleon, which is the shelter management database used by ACC, is capable of supporting notification to Facebook without any intervention on the part of ACC. It just needs somebody to set it up. The difficult part is done, everybody supports it. When we hear that this is an undue burden, what this says to the public is that ACC is not leveraging technology in a way that helps their management and that supports these goals. So my question for you is, what do you need to have that happen? What do you need to move this forward? Instead of talking about the difficulties, what does the commission need and what do the supervisors need to move that forward? Thank you for considering that.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment?
Hi, Nadine May. Speak as fast as I can. First of all, the issue of the within 48 hours really bothers me. It has to say 48 hours before. Having worked in the legal office, I know it has to say that. I am an interested party. I've saved innumerable animals from animal control who were going to be euthanized. One bit somebody. I was the surrender person. I came down, got him into good health. The second one had a leg broken. He wasn't my cat, but he was microchipped to me because I had him fixed through the spay-neuter program. I got him, had the leg amputated, he's in a great home. The other cat I spoke about last month, it was a cat who was in very poor shape and was not adoptable. Luckily, Give Me Shelter worked with me to get that animal out, and that animal is asleep on my couch right now, and I'm looking for a good home for him. He's very adoptable. Last but not least, this thing about CIP, this really needs to be reinstated ASAP. It's important. A couple of weeks ago, we found an animal with mange. We didn't know it had mange. We knew it looked awful. And we went to ACC and we sat at the front door trying to decide whether to bring the cat in or not. We decided that there was good likelihood that without any CIP, that animal looked so bad that he would have been euthanized. He had mange, we found out. He looked awful. He's a wonderful cat. We didn't walk into ACC. I took him to a vet and I had incurred $1,300. That cat is now very healthy. He's going to be adoptable, but we pay taxes here in the city. We rescue people, and I don't think I should have to incur $1,300 to save a cat who might have been able to be saved by ACC, or at least I would have put a CIP on that cat. They could have called me. I would have come down and gotten him out. He would be alive. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mark. I'm a San Francisco resident, and I would love to see this legislation get pushed to the Board of Supervisors. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment? Okay.
Madam Chairperson, I'd like to read a letter. I'd like to enter this into the record, if I may. This is a letter. If someone knows this organization, it's from Urban Wildlife Rescue. Sent a letter of support. I don't know how to pronounce that. I don't know if anyone does. It's YGGDRASIL. Anyway, the founder there is Lila Travis, who is in strong support of this legislation. I will just quote briefly. I feel wildlife calls from all over the San Francisco Bay Area because people have a mistrust of calling their local city agency, believing that the animal in distress would be euthanized. If there were consistent definitions that allowed for reliable and expected transparency, there would be more public trust. Likewise, the CIP program is vital for domestic animals, not wildlife, for supporting public trust and transparency. There's no negative for the CIP program, as it would facilitate an adoption and would reduce shelter overcrowding while reinforcing public trust. It goes on, but I just wanted to add that to them.
Thank you. Okay. So given the discussion here, I've heard from I heard from Commissioner Van Horn that we would like more information. One question answered, at least from Animal Care and Control, is whether doing it this way is better than what you're currently doing, which would answer the question of whether it's feasible or not. we can also give a chance for other interested organizations or rescue partners to weigh in, such as I know that Officer Ryan Crockett has been asked to come to next month's meeting. He runs the Vicious and Dangerous Dog Unit. He could potentially talk about the public safety issue. Or do we feel ready to, given the changes, put this to a vote?
I think I'd really like Virginia's input on it, and I think whatever changes we make, she should be able to review before and we need, like I said, more information from ACC before I feel comfortable with a vote at this time.
Also, another question for Mr. Spiel is, could you look into this? Is it true that Commision can post on social media with a one? Maybe you don't know now, but that's an intriguing idea.
Yeah, we'll check into that. I know we're in the process of upgrading. We've got like an older version of Commision which definitely needs to be upgraded. So, but I'll look into it and ask for your next meeting.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have thoughts on that question? Move forward or continue this until?
No, that I totally agree. I think I can tighten this up, put in the changes that we talked about, get the information from ACC. I can try to reach out to Austin and see what's going on, if they have any input there to provide us.
I would suggest you do that. I think it strengthens your case if you have other cities that are doing this and have some success with it. If there's some number that supports that, there's a stronger case that for support of this change.
Okay, then, so Commissioner Tarnowski,
One thing I want to clarify about the CIP, I know this is back from, I don't know, October, November, but we've been meeting about this for a few months. This is currently ACC's stance on inquiries from members of the public. We are restructuring our language around the process of calling interested parties so pathways are clearer for members of the public invested in the outcome of any applicable animal in the shelter. In place of the CIP, there will be two options for communications. One, finder to adopt. The finder of an animal may request contact by a staff member if they are interested in adopting the animal they have brought in, permitting they meet the screening criteria applicable to the animal. This hold is not applicable to feral cats, wildlife, and underage animals. Two, Good Samaritan call. A member of the public may request a Good Samaritan call for a staff member to contact them about the outcome of the animal. They are also encouraged to proactively contact the shelter to check on the status as they please. These requests differ from finder to adopt as the person in question is not interested in adopting the animal.
Thank you for that.
I know I'm not supposed to speak.
No,
I
yes.
am.
Public comment is over.
Neither of those
I'm
holds
sorry, public
is the
comment is
CIP.
over.
They don't work. They're not applicable.
We need to continue the conversation.
Go ahead.
That is not allowed, thank you.
So Bunny, if so hearing that language, it sounds like, unfortunately, again, in the case of Floppy, that Mr. Murkowski would have been the Good Samaritan in this case and should have been contacted, and for whatever reason that didn't happen. But it sounds like it's an issue, known issue at the ACC and is being worked through, but this legislation can only help reinforce.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My point was going to be there's absolutely no reason
There's no-
why they
there's no
can have that
change. This is the
policy
same.
and this can be codified
Correct,
as well.
yeah.
Okay, so what we're going to do is continue this until March, and Commissioner Tarnowski is going to revise the language in accordance with what has been discussed here.
Fair enough.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Moving on to feral cat management policy. The Commission will discuss updates regarding changes to Animal Care and Control's feral cat management policy. So as kitten season approaches again, I think next month, we will be discussing this issue with updates from Deputy Director Steele and also Maria Coleman from Give Me Shelter. Just briefly, in our last update in October, we learned that ACC had received calls about 12 feral families, and I think Director Donahue gave us the outcomes on those families, that 7 were fostered through Tony's Kitty Rescue, 4 went to rescue partners, 1 was euthanized for medical reasons. And in November, Commissioner Van Horn and I briefly reported on a meeting with SPCA's Community Cats program that reported that they are moving towards a foster model. for these animals, and they're working with CC on a guiding coalition to have consistent citywide standards between shelters for caring for these families. So Deputy Director Steele first, please give us your update.
Okay, so I do have an update, and this, I'll start with the kitten statistics, and so just to give you the up-to-date information, so don't go and add to this data, it was previously shared. So this is, the data is from January 1st, 2019 through December 31st of 2019. And for kittens, this is kittens 0 to 6 months. So the data I was able to get from staff is our intake was up 8% in this period. Adoptions for this population was up by 33%. The number of dead on arrival numbers decreased by 60% from 2018. Euthanasia decreased by 42% from 2018. Just to give you those numbers again, in 2018 there were 149 euthanasias, 60 died in care, and then in 2019 there was 85 euthanasias and 41 died in care. The died in care foster shelter outcomes have decreased by, therefore, by 31% since 2018. Kittens adopted under 6 months of age, that's 2018 without managed intake was 10.5 days. With managed intake, it's now 7.61 days, or a 27% decrease in the length of stay. So these are positive numbers so far, at least for kittens for this age group. The second piece of information I want to share is regarding nursing queens, and this data is from February 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2019, and the statistics are provided by both SPCA and the Community Cat Program. So year to date, there have been 300 of these dates, 326 feral spay neuter surgeries. Community Cat Program took 59. Since March of 2019, CCP has received and documented 531 phone calls. Of those calls, 13 have involved queens and nursing kittens, 13, and they've been asked to be left in the field. Of the 13, one group of 4 kittens died within days of the caller contacting us. The queen was still around, but no trauma to kittens. One group was adopted by the neighbour and spayed and neutered at their private veterinary clinic. 2 groups were brought by the Tony's Kitten Rescue, separate from the Community Cat Program. 3 groups have not returned calls. 6 groups have come through through TNR, 6 queens, 27 kittens brought for foster and adoption. So, what does all that mean? So there's been a total of 46 nursing queens, described as either semi-feral or feral, 14, non-feral, 31, and unclear, if that's even possible, 1. So of that group, 29 were fostered, feral 8 were fostered, and non-feral 21 were fostered. And the outcomes, adopted or redeemed from ACC were 20, adopted from SPCA were 13, transferred to other partners were 10, the SPCA and CCP were 2, and euthanized was 1. So that's the update I have for you for kittens and nursing queens. And then if the Commission pleases, I'd like to just share a couple of new programs that we have for the kitten season 2020 that we're about to get into. One new program is going to be a medical and behavior training for foster homes. This will be taking on special cases in collaboration with Tony's Kitten Rescue and staff at ACC. We'll expand and diversify our skill set for our foster homes. We'll be assisting in depopulating the shelter of contagious illnesses which help to prevent the spread of preventable disease. And will also hopefully help with stresses for under-socialized kittens needing more time and attention. And then the second program, which will be new for 2020 kitten season, is a new feral queen foster practice in collaboration with Tony's Kitten Rescue and our staff, and new standard operating procedures and foster instructions for willing and able homes ready to assist nursing feral queens unable to stay in the field or severely stressed in the shelter. And this is just the first update of what I hope will be regular updates for the Commission. They'll continue to monitor and evaluate the cats, their populations, these cats' population, and make adjustments as necessary to ensure best outcomes.
Thank you. And so I believe that Maria Collin had a brief update from the rescue community as well.
Hi, I'm Maria Collin, and as I represent for Give Me Shelter, in this case, I'm a representative for the cat community, just to clarify that. So John spoke about, there was a meeting, I met with Tony from Tony's Kitty Rescue, I guess it was last weekend, to just get an update from her. She said there was a meeting at ACC, that was when they talked about that they would allow the feral moms and kittens to go to TKR approved foster homes, which is what he mentioned. And then cats and kittens would be custody of ACC, and you expanded on that, the medical and behavior training and that kind of thing. So the second was, we just want to continue to have the shelter to be transparent with us, so I think that's great. It will continue to be on the agenda and to get updates, especially as kitten season approaches. I understand ACC or Tony have their first kitten, so teeny tiny. So we just want to be included in that and have that communication be transparent. And then, since I think the concern is that since SPCA CCP is handling some of the feral moms, like what happens, we just want to make sure that they're, even though they're a nonprofit, so they're not necessarily accountable to the public, but they are taking care of the public animals for San Francisco, that they are thus accountable to the public or have that close relationship with ACC. And then the one concern that we talked about, we hadn't heard about, is that there's no set protocol for at ACC if the members of the public, that I'm aware of anyway, that members of the public call about feral moms and kittens or moms and kittens. What happens if a member calls SPCA instead of ACC? How is that tracked? What are they told that if a member of the public calls ACC? What are they going to be told going forward? These kinds of things. Also, just a couple of things. So we'd like to hear what John has to say about that, but just a couple of other things. We wanted to just say, we took a cat, that one of the cats, I believe, that was deemed semi-feral. And, I think sometimes these cats are deemed a certain way, semi-feral or feral in the shelter because they behave a certain way because it's a stressful environment. But when you take them out and put them on a home, they act like a normal cat or maybe a little bit of a shy cat. So I think we need to be careful how we sometimes deem these cats in that environment. And then, the last thing I just want to say in regards to the CIP, it relates to this as well, because a lot of these people are trappers, they're out there late at night, trapping these cats, getting the moms and kittens, bringing them into the shelter, and then they become custody of ACC. And this is for like the moms and kittens, this is for these are for the under-socialized kittens. Nobody wants to see their kittens go back outside or just sent back outside, or their cats without knowing about it. They want to have an option to be able to do something. So that's why I think the CIP is so important, and I disagree that the way that is written is not the same as it was before. It is not a protection, it is not a safety net, and it gives ACC the control, and the person, the finder, is not able to take them back and help them the way they wanted to. So I think it's really important to go back to the way that it was previously. It was working, there weren't any issues with it. I mean, from members of the public's perspective and from many of the trappers and the people that bring in the cats that find it, like Nadine, who spent $1,300, that's ridiculous. But anyways, I know that's not related to my topic, but it is in a sense, because a lot of these trappers, they spend hours, they're invested, they have these cats and kittens that they bring into the shelter, and they want to make sure there's a safety net for them. So, you have questions for me? Or if you have anything to say about the phone structure and hot protocols, I'd love to hear that.
Thank you. Go ahead, Deputy Director Steele.
That I'd have to check for you and get back to you, because I don't know right now what the process is.
Okay, yeah, because we love to make sure that there's some kind of protocol in place so that they're either saying the same things, And then, I do believe that, you said that SPCA was gonna do, the kittens for 3 weeks. Again, it's still, we go back to what, last year, members of the public really have no idea how old cats and kittens are. I wouldn't know if I had been doing rescue for several years. I would never have known that this kitten is 3 weeks, this kitten is 6, weeks. I wouldn't know. Now I would have a better idea, but members of the public don't know anything about cats in that way, so. Anyways.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, yeah.
So let's open it up for commissioners' questions. So
Do you want me
Maria,
to stay up here?
please do if any commissioners have questions for you. So also, in addition to being just a discussion item and an update of what we were discussing last year, this can remain a discussion item, or if a commissioner thinks that some action needs to be taken other than what we have done, which is notify the Board of Supervisors in the letter that went out last summer, you can bring those ideas forward as well. So please go ahead if there's questions.
So, for you, Deputy Director Steele, I have one question. Has anything changed with regard to, I know, right, the policy before was that if the queen and kittens were considered at risk where they were, then they would go and take them out of that environment and bring them in. Is it now that they're working with the public too on trapping the queens and kittens and bringing them in through the medical and behavior and the other program as well too, expanding the foster network?
This might not be answering the question, but there was a standard operating procedure for feral queens and kittens for fostering that was drafted in July of last year, and it was just adopted February of this year. So I can get you a copy of that document. You can see if it's changed from what it used to be. It clarifies that role. I'll get you a copy of this. Or I can come back to the next meeting with more specific information.
Right, okay. So one of our issues with the previous, the letter that went to the Board of Supervisors was that those interested parties, those rescue groups were cut out of the equation of taking care of these animals. And so there was a level of distrust there that these rescue partners could even step up now and actually take the queens and the kittens into their own homes, or so I'm wondering, and they weren't being communicated with, that those queens and kittens are out there in the field. And I'm just wondering, has that policy changed? And do they now know that there are these animals that are out there if they're reporting to the rescue partners, or to through Tony's Kitty Rescue, through that?
I'm not aware of any policy change since that time.
Well, I have a question, a follow-on question for Maria, and you brought up the CIP, and I just want you to clarify. I think I heard you say that the language that was quoted by Bunny is inadequate, and that it does not allow the trappers to be interested parties, but
Because if a cat is deemed feral, a cat is deemed feral, the cat cannot be taken out. But a lot of times, ACC will deem a cat feral that is not a cat feral.
Okay,
So
the
therefore, I
issue
think
there
that's
is that
adequate, yeah.
the CIP applies to domestic animals and not feral.
Quote unquote adoptable
Right.
animals, but
Right.
we take cats out all the time that are fractious, feral behaving in the shelter that are like normal cats in the home.
Thank you
Yeah.
for clarifying. And then I have a question for Deputy Director Steele, and I don't know how I just don't understand this. I heard you say 500-something calls, 13 nursing moms with kittens, and then you listed where they went. And some of them, did some of them go directly to Tony's Kitten Rescue without going through ACC? And if that's the case, isn't that what the old policy was? I'm just confused.
All right, so it looks as if there were, Tony's here obviously, but there were two groups that were brought in by Tony's Kitten Rescue, separate from the Community Cat Program, of that group of 13.
Brought into the shelter?
Right.
Okay.
I should explain that. Sometimes we got, at that point last year, we were having a lot of issues with the SPCA and people not informing us about feral mom cats were out there. So there were a certain number, and there was actually more than that. There were probably about 10 that we fostered, and we just never took them into the shelter until the kittens were 4 weeks of age, and then they went in and got the shots, they got rescued. We ourselves took care of the mother cats. If they needed veterinary care, Tony's Kitten Rescue paid for it. We have a vet down in San Mateo who does that. And then we took them to the SPCA, got them spayed, and then brought them back to their colonies. And so there probably were about 10 that the cats never went into the shelter, but the kittens all did. They were all adopted out through there.
But ACC accounts for 3 or some
Yeah,
of
there's
them
2 or something, but there
were
but
officially.
at that point, it was really
Right,
hot and
right.
heavy, so we were like, okay, we'll just
Okay.
take those cats. People would call us, and there were cats in the sunset all over, and so someone would trap them, and then there were, I have like 10 foster homes that will take those kind of cats, so we just
Okay.
did that ourselves, which worked fine.
And before last year, with the disruption in this policy, if I understand, because this is where I get a little confused, I'm sorry. If I understand it, 2 years ago, of those 13 kittens, cats, of those 13, all of them would have been shepherded through
Yes.
ACC, SPCA, and then farmed out to rescue organizations, maybe, maybe not?
Well, and yes, that's
Okay.
exactly right.
And last year, because of the disruption, some of them seemed to bypass
We just
the.
bypassed it
Got
for
it.
4 weeks, and then the cats went back, so it worked out, it was
Okay.
much simpler.
Thank you for clarifying. And then do we agree, and also for you, Tony, do you agree that with the new, it sounds like there's been a lot of talk and the parties working together, and do you believe that with this new policy revision and communication, do you believe that that situation of the sort of the back door or will that be rectified in the coming season? Should it, if the new policy is adhered to?
I think it will. I mean, our only concern is the fact that right now it's not clear if the member of the public calls ACC and says, I have a mother cat and kittens in my backyard, what should I do?
Okay.
My understanding is the front desk is supposed to still say, well, if they're safe, then leave them there and contact the SPCA in a few more weeks when the kittens are old enough that eating on their own, and you can bring them all to them and get them fixed,
Okay.
which is what I do not agree with.
Okay.
I think all the cats should come in and we take care of them, we get them their shots. I can't tell you how many blind kittens you get when they're left out there and nobody's cleaning their eyes, and it's so easy to save them. And the same thing with the mom cats that don't get the shot for pan-luke and then come down with pan-luke and the mom and litters all die. And so it's just, to me, simple. Let's go back to the old policy, which worked perfectly well for years and years and years.
Okay, and so the glitch here is that, if I understand, that we're not sure what the protocol is on the receiving end of ACC when they get that initial phone call. It sounds like it's been worked out, and
We just don't know
We just
about
don't-
the phone calls, and we don't know
Right.
what the last year the SPCA was claiming that it was cruel and just, we should not take in mother cats because they're under so much stress. And they were wild animals, and we should not do that. We all totally disagreed. I've been doing it for 20 years. I've never had a mother cat die out of stress or anything else, but, and it just worked fine. And I'm just hoping they're all gonna forget that whole part, and Lucy Davis will stay out of it. And we will just continue to do the thing that we did for years and years. It worked perfectly. We never had any issues.
right, right. And if I understand, I think we believe we're moving in that direction?
We're hoping.
Well,
I'm very hopeful.
We have to be persistent that we move in that direction.
just to answer the question initially, because when Nina and I met with SPCA, unless they've changed their opinion in the last 60 days, regardless of what ACC decides to do as far as protocol, they have a deficit of foster homes and they're happy with the current program and currently have no plans on changing for 2020 kitten season, was what I remember them saying, right? So even if there was changes within ACC, SPCA currently doesn't have any plans to change the
So they
status.
will not be taking in any of the feral cats, you mean?
Moreover, in the way that they answer the phones.
Answer the phone, so they won't tell people to leave them out there in the field. That's
Or would they
what
tell
I'm
people to call ACC?
That's what we're not clear about yet.
Right.
Because they've been following protocol
Okay.
with the SPCA, what the SPCA, they seem to have kind of backed off
Right.
of that, but I'm still not 100% sure that, when the public calls, they're gonna be told, yes, we want you to talk to a trapper, or we want you to talk to our animal control officers, and that would be the easiest way, is we have plenty of trappers who go out, get them all, bring it into ACC, and we just do our regular fostering, but I'm not 100% sure that is gonna happen again.
Okay.
But that
And we
would-
don't know what SPCA is gonna
No, it
do, and
doesn't
we
sound-
really have no,
We
Doesn't
feel
sound
as
like
of 60 days ago, they're not planning on making any changes, so we would still be back into that position where if they call one agency versus another, the general public are gonna be told two
Leave
different,
them.
yeah, two
Leave them
different.
in the field.
Potentially, right, so
Which is-
when Brian and I did meet with SPCA's Community Cats Program, they did say that there wouldn't be a policy change, so the policy of calling trappers and rescuers, that was reversed, that wasn't changing. So we do need clarification on whether ACC is doing the same thing. When we spoke with SPCA, they said that they were putting together a coalition, that they would be doing the same thing, but, so we just need that answered.
thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Okay.
Okay, will this be on the agenda then continued, or kind of just maybe just an update sort of thing?
So we haven't decided yet, but
Okay.
thank you, Maria. I'm going to take public comment first
Okay.
before we decide what to do. Thank you.
Just one quick comment on a question. As I alluded to earlier today when we were talking about something else, and to reify that point, or though we were talking about earlier, the reason I know about Tony's Rescue working with, and that there are feral cats and kittens have already started, is because Animal Care and Control posted on their Facebook page a picture of a very cute black kitty rescued by Tony's Rescue that is saying it's not feral kitten season yet, but Tony's Rescue already has 2 litters. So that is the power of social media right there, telling me about this situation, how it works.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this issue? There is, please step forward.
I used to do a lot of TNR in New York as well. I'm just so confused by, one, why is the wildlife component never discussed in this issue? Migratory songbirds are in trouble everywhere, mostly because of humans and pesticides and population and stuff, but outdoor cats have a negative role in that. So it's not just about if the cats get stressed. The other thing is that if the issue is they're having mortality in the shelter and that's why they're doing this, then they're doing something wrong with sanitation and stress reduction and vaccination protocols, because that wasn't my experience, and that's not the experience of literally dozens of mostly women TNR folks that I work with. And the other thing is we talk about kitten mortality in a shelter as a reason to leave them out longer and rather than get a hold of this. And yet we're not talking about coyotes eating them alive or fly strike and maggots eating them alive, or them babies that are mobile crawling up into an engine and the car dragging off because it's warm. And all those things happen all the time. It should go back to the way it was, because that made San Francisco. In Brooklyn, there were times when I went out to do TNR where I would put traps out, and then I'd have 15 cats from 1 yard. And that's a milder environment. Here, there could be a much bigger feral cat problem here, and I think the reason it isn't that is because decades ago, people were really progressive in the city on this issue. And there's no reason, don't change it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. If it's not broke, don't fix it, yeah. And there's one other point that I wanted to make. I just wanted to agree, and that I hope you guys are fighting for it to go back the way it was.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Swami Yavnakis, and I've lived in San Francisco for a few decades. I've been, I've seen you guys many times, thanks for having us again. I've volunteered at ACC, I've fostered kittens this year quite a bit. I really think that Tony and Maria and PJ have made it really abundantly clear that the policy that worked before was working very well. Why are we changing this? The idea of leaving cats and kittens out in the field is really cruel. It doesn't work. It was working before. I really feel that ACC and SPCA need to have a uniform policy so that when the public calls, they know what to do. The public has no idea what ACC is compared to SPCA. There's a lot of confusion out there. They think it's the same thing. They really don't know. They don't have the expertise to decide how old a kitten is, whether they're in danger. They don't have the ability or the time to take care of these kittens in the field, in their backyards and so forth. So I really think that there should be consistency. These are city animals. If SPCA is working with ACC, it needs to also be accountable. Finally, I just want to say I do not understand this strange UC Davis sort of spell that has been cast about leaving animals in the field, specifically cats. I don't understand this at all. I don't know why this has taken hold. It's very dangerous. It's not good for animals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Me, I'd just like to support what all the previous speakers have said. Having been a tracker for almost 20 years, I know that there are a lot of us who are more than happy to get a phone call and go right out there and assess the situation, not necessarily to trap immediately, but to assess the situation. And we can tell how old kittens are, whether they're 6 months or 6 weeks. So the protocol should really be with ACC and SPCA to please work together, get the word out, uniform protocol if people call ACC or SPCA, and I agree with Fonnie. The general public does not know the difference. They constantly confuse them. So if they call either organization, they should be told immediately, we're going to get you in touch with a trapper who is knowledgeable, who will be able to come out and assess the situation. And that way we can work fast and do what we need to do. I do not agree with leaving kittens in a field, in the field in general. It is dangerous. I have seen kittens go blind. I've seen kittens eaten by raccoons. It is dangerous for them out there. And we would like to go out and get the moms and the kittens, get them into the program as soon as possible. We have enough foster homes now, so we can really go back to doing it the way we did, the way it worked. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no more public comment, I think that this is an ongoing discussion. If any commissioners think otherwise, we'll put this on the agenda for next month so that we can get a report from Deputy Director Steele as far as clarity on what the protocol currently is, and if that includes notifying the rescue community as well.
And I just wanted to make one other comment while you're here to confirm, because I want to be sure I'm remembering it properly from our SPCA meeting. But when we discussed concerns about migratory birds and that sort of thing, at least I felt like it was agreed upon that if they had a surplus of foster homes, that they would go out and trap every cat initially rather than leaving them out there. But at the time they had one foster home, they had gone through the approval process and the training process that was consistent with SPCA standards. So I'm super optimistic about the idea that ACC is now looking at training possibilities for their own foster homes. But we were told by SPCA, and I think I should say for them, that they are actively trying to expand their fosters, and as they do that, they would probably be bringing more of those animals in, and that they cited a lack of available fosters versus bringing them into their facility where they have had documented experienced increases in kitten mortalities. So that was the reasoning behind their decisions that they gave us.
Thank you. And Deputy Director Steele, if you can circulate, I think you had a policy there about ACC's foster program or training that's going on. If you wanted to circulate that to the commission before the next meeting as well, it could be helpful.
Which document was that?
Oh,
the SOP, yes, of course, be glad to.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Moving on to commission governance. Updates regarding efforts to secure oversight and update the commission's administration and website. Just briefly, Commissioner Torres and I attended the web content management training a few weeks ago, and Commissioner Torres is thankfully spearheading updating our website. He's already updated our roster, if it's better already. We're also probably going to, unless there are thoughts on this, change our address to something that is easy to find and remember. It would be /animals instead of AWCC, which doesn't seem to make sense as an acronym. And so I wanted to open it up to see if Commissioner Torres had more updates on that, and also I know Commissioner Tobin is still hard at work on getting administrative oversight for us.
The only things I wanted to add was I updated our list of commissioners. That's been updated. It hadn't been updated, I think, for quite a while, at least. I don't know, I'm not sure, I guess, but it's been a while. There are a lot of other pages, so I invite everybody to look at it. There are a lot of other pages that need to be completely redone. But we did make some changes as far as took out anything that was obviously out of date. We made things more consistent. Sometimes departments were listed as SF Police Department instead of San Francisco Police Department, and other times it was the opposite, so we changed that. We also are looking into updating at some point. We haven't touched this page yet, but the resources page, that's really out of date. I think a lot of this was maybe written or created at a time when there weren't a lot of websites or a lot of available information. So what you have is you have like contact information and other stuff for different organizations listed on that page. And what we hope to do is obviously just enter in a hyperlink to the actual website to get that information. That way we don't necessarily need to update that page as things change. We just go ahead and make sure the hyperlinks are perfect. So anyways, please look at it, and if anyone has any suggestions or any kind of comments, I'd love to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Brennan?
Oh, I wish I had an update. I have reached out to our team that is trying to get us the governance, and no response just yet, so I'm hopeful that we'll hear something next week.
Thank you. And the last thing I wanted to discuss was I circulated some changes to our orientation manual. I wanted to know if there were any comments to those changes. Just briefly, the main changes were to the officers' duties, to clean that up. I made the chair responsible for governance. I moved the chair's secretarial duty to the secretary, which Secretary Torres has already graciously stepped up to do. And so there was a question just about the duties of the vice chair. It seems like there was something written there that we don't adhere to, which is have the vice chair basically go over the task assignments and kind of hold commissioners to task. And I wanted to know, do we want to adhere to that or take it out and maybe add something else?
Traditionally, we've just done that at the end of the meeting in that kind of meeting notes. I don't think there's any real reason to have that as a specific duty of the vice chairperson.
Okay.
When we just kind of go over them at the end of the.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. That's what we've been doing. So.
That's how it's done the entire time I've been on the commission.
Okay.
If you feel a need to change, we can definitely change, but it seems pretty basic that we just all are on the same page when we leave.
Mm-hmm. So are you saying then we should keep that or?
No, you can change, you can take it out. It
Okay.
doesn't necessarily need to be in there because I've never done that per se. And like I said, we've always just, at the end of the meeting, the chairperson just readvises what we're doing going forward to make sure everyone understands what he or she's duties are, tasks are, assignments, whatever you want to call them.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah, I would say that duty has fallen on the chairperson.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's totally fine.
Just naturally as a way of
right.
Yeah, that's what I was
concluding
saying.
the meeting, yeah.
It's always been just kind of at the end of the meeting, that's just how we've done it.
It makes sense. So I guess the question is, do we want to give the vice chair a task? Because right now it seems like the vice chair's task is just to step in when the chair is absent, which is fine. I had two suggestions here. One, do we want to have the vice chair kind of support, whenever recommendations go out to the board, that is a lot of work for one person to take on. It's 12 different supervisors responding. Sometimes, the person leading the, whatever it is we're recommending is totally fine doing that, but sometimes they need help. So I was thinking maybe, somebody or the vice chair could step in to kind of be that support liaison administration role.
That's possible. Traditionally, again, a lot of this
It's
is
the
a
chair.
tradition. No. Traditionally, it's been the commissioner who has brought that issue forward. It's
Right.
that person's responsibility to move it forward past our commission.
If I may, I think a solution to this would be, I don't know what the wording would be, but I do like the idea of having a backup, maybe just a CC on emails or something like this, in order that there is someone else who's sort of in the flow, and if a commissioner is absent, normally when we assign tasks, it is two commissioners who take on a task, so perhaps it's not necessary, but maybe we could say, in the case of, there's just one commissioner performing a task, that the vice chair be included in any correspondence, something along those lines, just so nothing gets lost in the
No,
cracks.
that's fine, just as a backup, and that makes sense.
I mean,
With
right.
2 people, it then gets to 3, and
Yeah.
that's the coordination.
Does that sound
That makes sense, yeah.
reasonable?
And it would only be as necessary, and it kind of goes along with the duties right now, which are backup duties, so.
No, that makes sense. That's a good
Okay.
idea.
And so I guess my last question is also backup secretary. I know that we've had an alternate secretary. Do we want to make that an official post, or I know that oftentimes we just informally step in and that's fine, and none of these rules will change that. But do we want to say that somebody is to serve as a backup secretary, or just let that be informal? Informal,
I'm
okay.
fine with it just being informal, just
Okay.
in the instance of what if that person also can attend that meeting or
Okay.
something, and then it's like, oh, is that call on? Then it becomes informal.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. All right, so that's all I had. Do any other commissioners have updates?
Yes, I do have, so one thing we looked into a while ago is attendance and attendance requirements for the commission. And it's quite vague in this document, and in fact, I've researched this, and the charter is quite vague also on what the requirements are. Currently on page 3, it says terms of office. Any member who misses 3 regularly scheduled meetings of the commission during each 2-year term without the express approval of the commission will be deemed to have resigned from the commission. That's a little too vague for me, and I think it would be beneficial to have something more clear. For example, a member who, so it would be the difference between a known absence, notified within 24 hours, to the chairperson, in, what was that language of verifiable, traceable, what was the language? Documented, verifiable, whatever, communication 24 hours prior to the meeting, if that person cannot attend. So that would be, let's call it, lack of a better word, an excused absence. And then if there are, if there are 3 regularly scheduled meetings that are not excused or without prior notification, if you have 3 of those within a year, then you are asked to resign or forced to resign. And, which brings me to, there's really no way to kick someone off the commission. So I think we could say, and then the commission should vote whether or not that person is to be removed. So that, because in the past when we've had attendance issues, and I know going back even before me, the sort of the policing of this, it falls on the chairperson, which really isn't fair, and it's just kind of weird. So if we could have sort of normalize this, I think it would be a good idea.
I question the legality of this. In all honesty, we don't decide who's on the commission. That's up to the board
Well,
of
here it says
supervisors.
You can ask for it though.
So
Deemed to resign.
that is where, that's where I was getting,
Yeah.
is I think before this should be run by, we have
Yeah.
hours with the attorney.
Yeah.
These things should be done.
Because this
run by the
wasn't a
attorney.
major problem initially.
It has been, attendance has,
We-
it's not now, but it obviously has
It
been an
was,
issue in the
like,
past.
Several years ago, there was like 4 months in a row we didn't have meetings.
Yeah, we've had to
There
cancel
were
meetings. and
Definitely issues in the
And it
past.
hasn't been with the current, we've
Yes, thankfully.
been rocking it the
But
last couple of years.
as you said, there is no recourse for us
Right.
to take when
Mhm.
people obviously did
We're not
not
interested,
follow
right?
what was the codified language
Expectation.
or whatever it is. Clearly didn't follow those
Mhm.
guidelines or bylaws or whatever they're called.
So, okay, so, well, because then it goes on page 5, if you're unable to attend the meeting, you must inform the commission chair prior to the meeting. That, again, it's a little too vague. So, may I take a stab at some new language regarding attendance and run it by our lawyer?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and loop back around with that, okay. Great.
Yeah, that's obviously my main concern is we literally don't decide who's on the commission. That's the board of supervisors that does that.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, that was it for mine. Okay, is there any public comment on this issue?
Not on this issue, but can I make a comment?
There will be time for public comment at the end for issues not on the agenda. Okay, so seeing no public comment, and there were no comments on the changes that were already made, and I will make the change to the vice chair's duties as discussed. So those changes.
Are we allowed to make those changes?
This is a document that we made.
Okay,
Right, yeah,
that's what,
right.
I'm just, like I said, I'm just making sure that we're doing everything by the book.
Right,
I'm not
so,
I'm fine with those changes, I'm just asking.
okay. So, we'll wait for Commissioner Fortier's changes, and then we'll continue this to the next meeting where we can vote on approving everything at once, or not. Okay, great, thank you. Moving on to general public comment. Now is your opportunity to address the commission with comments on items within the commission's jurisdiction other than items on the agenda at the beginning or end. And I just wanted to remind everyone, if you've spoken at the beginning of the meeting about a topic, just for time's sake, please don't repeat it again at the end. Thank you. Go ahead.
I understood all that. My name is Henny Martin. I've been doing TNR here in San Francisco since 2003. And I gotta say, it's very frustrating sometimes to attend these meetings. It's gonna be March. We've been talking about the mama kitten since last year. I really hope by next month we can come to some kind of decision, some kind of resolve. You know, doing TNR, I was hoping, I really don't want to be doing this the rest of my life. But with this current policy that we have in place, I truly believe I'm just going to start from square one when the population of kittens were very high in San Francisco. So, just voicing my opinion. And also, we really do need to reinstate the CIP at Animal Parent Control. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Genevieve.
My name is Genevieve Murphy, and I'm a San Francisco resident. I'm calling regarding something that hasn't been on the agenda or talked about. We've all seen the recent news with the coronavirus outbreak and also years ago SARS. This has occurred in the live animal markets in China. Additionally, China is also having it's not reported in the news, is an avian flu outbreak as well. One thing that we've seen this in China. We've also seen a lot of economic harm happen in Chinatown due to the fact that no one wants to go to Chinatown because they're afraid, even though there's no causal, because they're afraid of that, and also in restaurants. Right now, we allow those live animal markets in San Francisco. There's a lot of public health concerns there, and the fact that we're basically perpetuating the same situations that caused the novel coronavirus in China, we're perpetuating these situations in San Francisco. So I have a concern here. China has stopped this practice, maybe temporarily, maybe permanently. I would ask the commission to look into, or I can present information or anything else in the future. This is regarding basically stopping these practices in San Francisco. I also have a curiosity in whether Proposition 12, which requires a certain amount of room for chickens, would be allowed with these live animal market chickens, would be allowed to go forward. It's just a question.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment?
okay, can I ask it be added to the agenda for next session?
We can consider it.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Patricia Briggs. I really am very grateful to the lady here that spoke about the coronavirus. As I probably mentioned, we worked on this issue in the mid-1990s. It went on for years. We finally got a law passed in the Sacramento State Legislature that you cannot flay these animals alive. Unfortunately, it was watered down to being a infraction. And it's just astounding. I mean, Chinatown is absolutely a cesspool. We looked at all the live animal markets. We looked at Safeways that had, or Albertsons that had live food tanks like crabs and catfish. We looked at the flea markets, the farmers markets part of the city at 7th and Market Street. We looked at, restaurants, Fisherman's Wharf, restaurants that had live animal tanks. So anyway, the funny thing is that there's been over, I believe it was 70 countries that asked China to close these markets down completely, but this has been their tradition for thousands of years. You know, they want to eat live animals because they believe it gives you, like for example, turtles are killed because they live a long time, and it's believed that they will impart this quality to you if you eat them. So it's going to happen here, it really is, so we have to do something about it. These frogs have the chytrid fungus. Over 2 million, or is it 2 billion, bullfrogs are imported every year into California. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that because she had said that. But I wanted to mention something else that is a new subject. I had an up-close and personal experience with an animal that is one of the most maligned animals on the face of this earth. The movie Dracula did not help him at all. This is the bad. Recently, can I just say really quickly? Is it okay? I only commented, I commented extra because I wanted to address what she said.
You can have 1 minute.
Is that okay? Okay, I went upstairs in our house. We've lived in our house for 59 years. This has never happened before. I saw something on the ground that looked like wet leaves, wet black leaves that you would see in the winter on the sidewalk when it was raining. And I looked very closely and I saw it had little fingers. And it was just a miracle of creation. This was a bat. And unfortunately, our cats had a way with him. He must have flown in, at dusk the previous day, and I only found him the next morning. We called Animal Care and Control. They came and picked him up. I thought he was dead. He was just barely alive. He had a lot of puncture wounds. He had a wing that was injured. And anyway, long story short, and I want to present this issue further, and I'm going to write a letter. I'm going to give documentation to you all. I called Wild Care, and they said that, they triage the animal, and they watch him, they put him in quarantine. If he comes up with rabies, they'll euthanize him. But the Department of Public Health, the Department of Communicable Diseases, automatically wants these animals euthanized. They're demonized, they're just like rats. And anyway, yeah, he did not have rabies is the bottom line. Only 3 in San Francisco.
Thank you.
3 had rabies.
Thank you so much.
That's not people, that's the animals.
Moving on to items to be put on the calendar for future commission meetings. Oh, I'm sorry, is there more public comment?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I didn't pay her to do that, by the way. The issue that I wanted to ask if could be on the next agenda is the SFACC bat policy. Was Virginia here in October? Okay, so since the summer, this has been a known issue. And to give credit where credit is due, I think it would be worse if John wouldn't have joined ACC. All bats for 20 years have been being killed at ACC, regardless of human contact, regardless of health, regardless of situation they're found in. Hundreds of bats I've gotten the public records because I found this out when I was investigating Floppy's killing. So most of the bats are found that are completely healthy, who have been disrupted in their dens, there have been no human contact, they've been killed. Bats are already in trouble. There's white nose syndrome in California now, if you guys know what that is. Hoary bats, which are one of the species that ACC takes in, their population populations are diminishing. ACC doesn't even bother to identify the bat or take a picture of them, so it's possible that the bats are being killed are members of species that are of special concern or in trouble. I've talked at length, the policy, and this goes with another comment, this has been going on for 20-some years. This has been an issue. Virginia said that this is being addressed in October. It's still not addressed. There's still no new policy. The ACO handbook still says under bats that no bats are returned to the wild, all bats are killed. It still says that. I know John is, I checked in with a ACC employee. I was like, has there been bats killed? No bats have been killed since you brought this to our attention. I did an open records request and that was untrue. More bats had been killed. I had offered, I just want this on the next agenda because it's a complicated issue and it needs action from you guys.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment?
Very briefly, Nadine, I support what PJ said about bats. And I support what Pat said about live animal markets. This has been worked on since the 90s, like she said, and I don't have a lot of hope that there will be enforcement of the policy unless and until somebody dies because they have eaten a diseased frog, for example, of which millions are imported into California. And then last but not least, just in general, if somebody here is an expert and they, like, you read something that Virginia Donahue had written, and that is basically so written in stone, I can't get up and say anything about that. It's sort of, I feel like I'm in Trump land, and he's saying, oh, you know, the emperor has beautiful clothes, and I'm like, no, I'm sorry, he doesn't have any clothes at all. So I don't know if there's anything that can be done, because I know it's protocol, but I find it very frustrating that we can't respond after somebody who is supposedly an expert has said basically ABC, and then we don't have the right to get up and say, no, I'm sorry, it's not correct. And I apologize for my outburst earlier, but I didn't see any other way of saying it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment? Seeing none, moving on to items to be put on the calendar for future commission meetings. So several items have been continued to March. That is the euthanasia protocol, the feral cat management policy, commission governance. I wanted to ask about the state animal shelter grant issue.
Yeah, I'd like to put, I'd like to give an update on that. There are a series of meetings. Maria, you probably did receive the information I forwarded to you about.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Series. There are calls that are taking place right now to explain the new grant process, proposed grant process, and approval process. I have put up there some information about the trailer draft language for the budget item, which is the Article 7.9. And I will follow up with any additional as it's moving through the budget approval process.
Okay, so we can put that on for next month because it seems like it's an ongoing discussion,
Absolutely.
right? Okay.
I think it'll impact the rescue partners in particular too.
Okay.
And I just, to add on but not discuss, the budget must be approved by June 15th. So just to clarify, this is a proposal and
Right.
it has not been entered
This is a
into.
draft.
That's right.
Okay, is there anything else that commissioners want to add on right now? If not, then we know what to do, which is if any commissioners want to come forward with other issues, please let me know.
Well, we did talk about wanting to invite Officer Ryan Crockett to talk about the, it's been almost a year now since there's been a new policy in place for the hearing officers. So just to get an update on that, how that is working. Also, maybe some feedback too that might be helpful for the proposed changes to the CIP and
Okay, so we'll confirm whether we're going to have a report from Officer Crockett for March. Is there any other comments on these items or other items? Is there any public comment on this issue?
No.
Okay,
No.
sorry.
Sorry.
New chair, learning the rules.
Sorry.
Okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.